program. Mark Oppenheimer is, of course, a constitutional attorney from South Africa. Well, we go right from one guest to the other, and this is a guest co-host here is joining me. There he is. There is none other than ZZ Top himself. No, that's not ZZ Top. That's the two of us could play for ZZ Top between my beard and his hair. Mark, how's it going, brother?
I think I'm the only smart dressed man in this video, though, so I'm much more ZZ Top than you. Okay. Although that beard is kicking my ass.
Well, but see, I have wardrobe changes going on all day, and I haven't had a chance to change because my first guest went for an hour and a half. I just got him off like 30 seconds before I brought you on. At the top of the hour, we have Refiloe Nt'sekhe, the DA's candidate for Ekurhuleni for mayor. She's brilliant. She'll be on, and so you'll be on here with me if you get a chance to ask her questions as well. All right, so Mark, well, here it is. We talked about this. We talked about it. The Concourt said, no, you must go forward with this election. And here we are. It's special voting today. I've already seen in Hermanus where elderly who claim they were registered to vote were denied voting today. So they're not on the rolls. So we're already seeing some strange things happen. But this happens in elections, so let's not get too excited. So any initial thoughts about what's going down right now?
Yeah, I think it's best to reserve judgment until we have a full sense of how the election goes. I mean, there have been a couple of changes besides the Constitutional Court in this recent matter telling the IEC that elections have to go ahead. The other one has been a process that's gone on for a number of years, which is to ensure that people that vote actually live in the areas in which they're based. So the IEC had an obligation to ensure that registered voters could be tracked to the area in which they live. And why that matters is that you're voting for a particular person in your ward or a particular mayor. And the concern is that you could bus in candidates from other areas in order to gerrymander outcomes. And the IEC was ordered to do this by the Constitutional Court a number of years ago. They failed to do it, but have now complied. But it took them many more years than the court had allowed them. So it'll be interesting to see whether it has an effect on the election results. The other thing that's worth keeping an eye on is turnout. So this can play quite a big role in terms of working out how parties will do. So you have a thing called differential turnout, which is one of those things that the DA, for example, has used to its advantage in municipal elections before. So the idea is that ANC voters are less likely to turn out in municipal elections because they're often keen to vote for the figurehead of the party. So they want to vote for a presidential figure, and they're less keen on voting for the kind of ward councillor administrator types. But the DA kind of run this, we're a party of good governance thing. We'll make sure that, your potholes are fixed and the streetlights work. And so they tend to get their voters out more often. And so the advantage of differential turnout is that you can punch above your weight. So you sort of see this difference between national election results and municipal election results. If you look at the DA's last municipal election results, they're very impressive. It would be interesting to see if they can obtain those results again. The polling sort of doesn't show it. Of course, on the polling question, a lot of what I've seen on the polls is it pretends that we're in a national election. So it'll say things like, are the ANC going to dip below 50%? Doesn't matter.
No, it's not germane at all.
Not at all germane. If you sort of think, well, it's some kind of temperature checker, sure, maybe it's symbolic, but it's not really relevant. The question is, what's going to happen in the metros? And the exciting stuff, of course, is who's going to be running Joburg, who's going to be running Tshwane, who's going to be running PE. In that 5 years ago, you had these changes that were quite significant. So the DA managed to run a bunch of these places, but not for very long because they didn't win outright. So they had these disastrous semi-coalitions. The original DA story on this was in Cape Town. So Helen Zille managed to get together a 7-party coalition. It is an impossible feat, and did it without the Independent Democrats, who at the time were sort of seen as the coalition partner of choice. And the Independent Democrats basically said, we're going to back the ANC because they're going to give us nicer treats. And they thought, that would basically end the DA's chances. And Ryan Coetzee managed to get this incredible deal together, and they got all these parties with these totally different views around a table. And in the next election cycle, the DA had sort of shown its, how good it was at governing in the Western Cape, and it just won by an outright majority. Interesting to see what happens this time around, because what we had was Herman Mashaba, being the mayor in Joburg as the minority candidate. So all who you got to look at for support. Well, they didn't have a formal coalition with the EFF. They had this sort of behind the scenes coalition, like a voting coalition. So you need them to pass your budgets. So, well, if they're going to vote against your budget, what do you have to give them in return? All sorts of the things that they want. And of course, the EFF's party principles are dramatically different to the DA party principles. I think one of the difficulties is that the party hadn't really given proper thought to what was going to happen. Remember when Herman was campaigning, bear in mind, Herman's line was, I'm the capitalist crusader, right? I'm this businessman, and so people were quite excited about him. And I said, Herman, look at the polling data. Polling data says there's no way that the DA can win outright in Joburg. What's your plan for coalitions? How are you going to manage this? He says, my plan is to win outright. I said, that's not a fucking plan. And it was evident how badly it backfired, because basically their plan was to lose. They didn't expect to win. They suddenly win and they thought, oh, this is kind of incredible. Okay, we've now the dog who's caught the van. And it turns out that the van bites back quite hard. And so you're running the biggest city in the country, the basically economic powerhouse of the continent. And to be honest, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. A lot of my practice involves suing the city of Johannesburg on behalf of clients for billing issues and for cutting people's water and power off for unjust reasons. And what was interesting was when Herman got elected, the city officials totally different. It was like day and night. They said, what can we do to help resolve your matter? We know this has been a long-standing issue, but don't worry, there's a new mayor in town. Everything's going to be great. About 2 months in, things just got way worse. Very draconian, very totalitarian. Herman, who sort of claimed to be, a crusading capitalist, basically spent his time dressing up in various outfits. A friend of mine has this great collection of Herman as a firefighter, as a road worker, as sort of. You think about the YMCA, basically the leather assless chaps and the sort of Indian headdress. That was Herman. But he'd be going around shutting down foreigners' businesses, making lives uncomfortable for people, cutting off people's water, and extracting money from them. The latest thing from Herman is this interesting tweet that they send out. Now, Chris, you lived in South Africa. You're not a South African, so you should feel sensitive about this issue. He says, if you want to run a business in South Africa, you must have a South African ID, and you must only employ South Africans. And then he links to a video of someone else, and that person says, we as South Africans used to run all the spaza shops and supermarkets until the foreign invasion, and we call on the South African government to deport Somalis. So I went and spoke to Michael Beaumont about this, who's the campaign manager. He says, "Oh, no, you don't understand. It's just a communications error. Really, Herman didn't watch the 45-second video that he tweeted. That's fucking astounding if you don't have the patience to watch a 45-second video, and it has inflammatory stuff like, let's go and expel people, not on the grounds of whether they're here illegal or not, but on the grounds of their nationality. Bearing in mind that South Africa has a constitution which says everyone has certain rights here. That doesn't just apply to citizens, it applies to everyone residing in its borders. They then say, no, we didn't mean it that way. Also, when we said South African ID, we didn't mean it that way. We kind of meant any legal documents. So basically say something massively xenophobic in a country where people have been burnt alive for being foreigners. Yep. Okay. And, in 2008, you had horrendous xenophobic attacks. You had a guy called Ernesto Namuvwe who was burnt alive because he was a Mozambican. So it's not just oopsie, sorry, kind of got the comms error wrong. You're endangering people's lives with this stuff. So I really, really hope that the Action SA get absolutely no traction in this election, but we shall see. We see if one of those parties that the DA can cobble a coalition with it, or whether they say you're beyond the pale, like the EFF who are also beyond the pale.
Well, it's as you were telling that, I wrote down on my board here before you even got to that stage the word xenophobic, because when you start talking about Herman Mashaba, that's what I wrote down as one of my notes here to discuss with you, and you've just covered it. You talk about xenophobia. This Herman Mashaba is constantly bringing this up. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oopsie. It was intentional to pander to an element of bigotry and racism in South Africa. And yes, racism. Black folks can be racist against other Black folks. If people don't think that's true, you're not really tuned into the world of Homo sapiens. But yeah, no, it's the xenophobia. It's quite frightening, as you said. There's an interesting film. One of my favorite South African films called The Long Run, and it stars Herman Muller-Stahl, who is the from former East Germany, but the German actor who's very talented. And he plays a German who immigrated to South Africa decades before he runs, you know the movie. And in that movie, there's this Namibian girl, Christine, who he becomes her running coach when he's kicked out of the brick factory by the nouveau riche cadres from the ANC. And she runs and hides because they come through the neighborhoods looking to kill foreigners. And this is from nearly 20 years ago. And I was like, yeah, this was true. It's very true to life. This xenophobia, it crops up all the time, but it crops up in a very scary way periodically in South Africa. And it's quite frightening to see a major politician who runs a party now actually stoke this sort of thing.
Yeah, the other guy who did it quite publicly was Jimmy Manye. So he's part of ATM. And also, heads up the Jacob Zuma Foundation. And I did a show with him and Gareth Cliff, and he made this point. It's so utterly bizarre, which he says we should have a constitutional amendment which disallows naturalized South Africans. In other words, you were born elsewhere, converted to become a South African through a legal process, from being allowed to become president. Okay. So first of all, this is the biggest non-issue ever, right? There's never been anyone who stands a chance of becoming president of South Africa who has some, foreign lineage. So why are you bringing it up? Because you want to say, I think there should be two classes of people in South Africa. There's the real people, the good people, the South Africans, and then there's those dirty foreigners. And some of those people are going to pretend that they're South Africans because they've gone through this legal process. We need to make sure that they know their place. What's funny, of course, is America has a rule like this, right? So that's why Arnie can't become president.
Exactly. Well, but not to worry, folks. If he wants a two-class system, it's already here. It's already in New Zealand, where Jacinda openly says that people who are jabbed should be treated properly, and those not jabbed should be like serfs and second-class citizens. It's already amongst us, folks. Freedom of choice is not something that's out there these days. Pretty frightening. So as far as the election, now we've got Refiloe Nt'sekhe, who's coming up at the top of the hour, and she'll join us, Mark. So you'll be able to get a chance to ask her some questions. I don't know if you know her, if you've met her, but I had her on for an interview this weekend. It was incredible. She was really articulate, brilliant woman. It was fascinating to see. So hopefully we'll see what she has to say. Now, I don't expect her to be on for the whole time. I've asked the politicians and the candidates, they could come on 10, 15 minutes or so, or if they can stay longer. So, and I know you're with me for at least an hour. If you can stay longer, you're welcome to, but if you got to duck out, you just let me know. I know it's been a busy weekend for you. Unlike most South Africans, you actually work on the weekends, so anyway, but seriously, now there's a comment from Paulie, who's our resident firefighter. He said back in 2008, when he started his career, he was in Cosmos City, where the foreigners were being burnt alive. He said, well, welcome to the emergency service in South Africa. That's how he got introduced to his job. Pretty frightening, horrific stuff. I mean, unfortunately, I've been around burn victims from combat, and it is not a good thing. And to do that intentionally to a person, and you go back to the necklace thing back in KZN in the 1990s, and it's really stomach churning that people can actually do that to another human being. Crazy stuff. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think, if you're trying to work out who you want to vote for, you want to say, well, who cares about constitutional principles? Who cares about equality? Who cares about freedom? Who cares about dignity? And there are certain parties that have made it very clear that they despise those principles. So, the EFF doesn't care about freedom. The EFF, wants to take your stuff, wants to restrict your choices. The ANC, I mean, if you care about freedom, this is not the party of choice, right? I mean, there's sort of amount of freedom that's been taken away from South Africans over the last couple of years, and the dangers that we've been faced by their sort of moves to try and amend the constitution, take away our property rights, restrict free speech. So there's sort of narrow choices available for people who kind of care about those things.
Well, I just got a super chat from Leah Janssen from Rensburg. She says, thank you, Chris. So awesome to hear Mark's plain speech. Love listening to two of you. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation with Mark. Mark, I think this is your third or maybe fourth appearance. I think third appearance in the program. And I really like your clear speaking. You may be a lawyer, but you don't speak in lawyer terms. People get it. You can speak to people understand it layman's terms, which is very helpful. But what I also like is that, in the journalistic role, I've tried to, I don't want to say bait you, but, put something out there. Remember when I said that, Judge Nt'sekhe must just be captured. And you immediately came to his defense and said, there's no evidence of that. This gentleman's not doing that. Now, I don't actually believe he's captured. I was just trying to get a response that one time. So my point is that Mark doesn't fall for that. So I don't try that trick on him anymore because he doesn't fall for that stuff. So he's too clever for that. But hey, listen, let's look at this. You said the three that are interesting, and I agree. The three that are really interesting are Nelson Mandela Bay, Johannesburg, and Tshwane. And so here's my prediction, and then you tell me your thoughts on it. Nelson Mandela Bay, I think the DA can pull out a 50+1 there. I think they can do it. I think they're going to take Nelson Mandela Bay. And if they don't, they'll be able to roll it through a coalition because the ANC is going to drop. They're going to drop. People are so angry in Nelson Mandela Bay in Gebana that they just, hutfall. So that's the first one. You like that, huh? Back to back, Gebana and hutfall back to back. That's a tough one there. Anyway, so we throw in the Khoi and we throw in the Afrikaans, and they almost sound the same. Oh, is that what it is? Quebec. Okay.
Quebec, yeah, they're very keen on French, and
you're right up here. Yeah, it's in Montreal. Yes, that's right. The Quebecois. Yeah, no. So
they also want to secede. Is it those guys?
Oh, they do want to secede. They've been doing that for years. Yeah, which is ironic because Trudeau comes from there, and he's trying to keep Canada together. But anyway, so that's the first one. Joburg. It's going to be a tough one to call. I don't know which polls to believe or not believe because that looks like a Weizen glass you've got there, a little a beer glass. But that's clearly not beer. But so Joburg, because of Herman Mashaba and Action SA, because he has his residual popularity from being a successful businessman during the apartheid era and after the apartheid era, and he's got a reputation with among a lot of people. Plus, some of the things he says, like the xenophobic, will bring people to a standard. I've said that it's tough to say. I say the ANC gets over 20%, the Action SA gets over 20%, the DA gets over 20%. Who gets over 30 or who gets to 40? I really can't predict. I think that because of Herman Mashaba, that no one's going to win an outright majority in Johannesburg. There's going to be a coalition there no matter what happens. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Herman gets 10%.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I also think, here's my prediction as to where that party goes. Mampela had a party called Agang.
Yes, it went nowhere. It went nowhere.
Yeah, she sort of thought, I am God's gift, and South Africans love me, and I'm going to do incredibly well. And basically, I think got 2 seats. She decided not to take either of them up. Basically, sort of scuttled away in shame. And then the 2 guys who got those seats ended up having a fight with each other, and the party split and became non-existent. So I wouldn't be terribly surprised if that's what happens to this sort of one-man show of a party. I mean, bear in mind where Action SA is running. I mean, I think it's only in 6 different places. So yeah, I mean, maybe they'll get a little bit of support in Joburg, but I'd be surprised.
Well, that's interesting. Nice prediction there. So you're on the ground. You see it closer. You see what's actually going on. I'm just trying to call it from afar. So we'll see. That would be interesting to see. But the ANC is definitely not going to take 50% in Joburg. I would be shocked to see them take 50%. Now, you mentioned earlier the DA, the figure that doesn't matter is the national level. But you did say that in 2016, and correctly, that they had a respectable showing, almost 27% of the total votes. But it really doesn't matter. It's how many votes they get in Joburg, how many they get in Tshwane. Now, Tshwane is a little bit more of an odder one. This one's hard for me. Maybe you got a better feel, a pulse on the ground for this. But for Tshwane, all things being equal, I would have said the DA would have gotten a majority there, but I'm not convinced of that now because Ramaphosa has put a lot of energy and effort, not that anybody believes what he's saying, but a lot of energy and effort into campaigning in Tshwane. That's where they did the launch of their manifesto at the church Square. And they've really put some effort. Plus the EFF has put a lot of energy in there too. And as I'm trying to remember, was you or my previous guest, we were talking that one of the things that's happening here is a lot of people that it was my previous guest who are angry with the ANC. Some of them are just voting for the EFF because they think that'll teach the ANC a lesson. And that's not a wise move, but I think some of that's going on in Tshwane too. So what are your thoughts on it? I'm not sure the DA can get a 50+1. And a year ago, I would have said this is a cakewalk. They should get a 50+1. What about Tshwane?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think that there's a possibility of the DA being able to take it, but it'll be very tight, which makes it exciting. The difficulty, as I say, with these coalitions is trying to find coalition partners that you can work with, and you've got to have someone that you actually share ideals on, and it can't just be that we don't like the ANC. It's got to be something more than that. I mean, bearing in mind that there's a difference between running a municipality, which really isn't particularly ideological in some ways. It's service delivery. It's ensuring that, let's say, things are repaired. That things function. So there might be certain people that, let's say, for example, if the DA see themselves as, let's say, secular. So in other words, a party for people of all faiths, they might think that they can have a coalition with the ACDP, being a Christian party, because they share enough in common, even if not on that issue, but on the other stuff you might be pragmatically aligned. They might be okay with coalitions with COPE or the Freedom Front Plus. But they've outright said they can't do it with the EFF, and I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, the EFF haven't governed anywhere, and it would be an interesting little experiment to see how they would do. Do they sort of take their communist principles seriously? Do they care about the poor? What would it be like? Was anyone kind of keen for a little experiment on that front? I remember I did some election monitoring a while ago. This was in 2014, so it was a national election. And there's an ANC guy and an EFF guy. And I sort of jokingly said to the EFF guy, so who are you voting for? And he says, I'm splitting my vote. I'm sort of surprised. I said, okay, tell me more. He said, well, I'm voting EFF nationally, but provincially I'm voting the DA. I said, why? They said, well, I want Julius in Parliament to give Zuma a hard time. And I want the DA to govern my province because I think they'll do a good job of it. And I don't trust the EFF to do that. So there's sort of a not in my backyard feeling. And that might explain why the EFF won't do very well in municipal elections. You don't have the grand soaring kind of rhetoric. You've got to do like the hard, dirty work.
Well, never mind the fact that I looked at their manifesto and 8 pillars, 6 of them aren't even municipal competencies. They're national competencies. They're not going to change tax rates and redistribute land like they claim in the fashion they're talking about. It's just utter nonsense. They're just pandering to people with bigotry and hatred and fantasies. I think that the EFF lives in Disney World and they just don't tell people that's their actual postal address. They are really out there. It's pretty crazy stuff. Now, here's one for you, Mark. Let me get your thoughts on this one. Nobody was talking about this a year ago, and I'll confess I wasn't one either. Last year when I started talking about local elections, and I said in June of 2020, I said, now that they've eased the lockdown, get out there. Every opposition party, get in the hostels and the mining camps, get in the townships, get in the leafy suburbs, get in the farmsteads, get around the country now. You must work retail politics 365 days a year, 7 days a week to get people to come to your party standard. If you wait till 90 days before the election, you've lost already. Now, maybe we have an exception this year, but I said, you've got to do that. And then the ANC just gifted me all the ads. No open-toed shoes, arrested for surfing on the beach. How's that cooked chicken going for you? Hey, have you lost your job? One of the 3 million people lost your job. What about no e-commerce? Brought to you by the African National Congress. I mean, it's so easy, and the DA refuses to attack. Well, we've got Refiloe coming on here now. So so Durban is, let me get you a chance on, that's what I'm talking about. I wasn't talking about last year, but Durban, that's one that is really interesting to me because of the insurrection within the ANC that took place in KZN and Gauteng. I think that the ANC is under 50% now as a consequence of that. It's how strong with the IFB, how strong with the DA do, and even the UDM's making a play for there. What are your thoughts on Durban?
Yeah, I mean, this is a sort of interesting thing about South African amnesia. When we were watching that unfurl, I mean, I think people thought this is a ground shift change. You're basically watching violent protests go on for a week, stores being looted and destroyed, hundreds of people killed, the police and the army almost nowhere to be seen, civilians having to defend themselves with their own, private guns. By the way, I think if people were skeptical about private gun ownership, when you see the mob descend upon you, you think, actually, pretty useful for me to have my own weapon, and maybe a 9mm isn't sufficient. Maybe I need a semi-automatic gun so that I can stop these guys from killing my children and destroying my shop and my house. You'd expect a lot of people to say, how can I vote for a government that was nowhere? How can I vote for a government that left me to die? But, South Africans are incredibly resilient. People sort of, move on with their lives, they rebuild, and they forget. So we shall see. I mean, they should be, if voters act rationally, the ANC should be so punished in that case. But, voters aren't always acting rationally. They're acting for emotional reasons.
Well, of course, as we talked about previously, as we give a chance for Refiloe to pop up, you're welcome to join us now, ma'am. Mark Oppenheimer is on the program with me. But as you and I talked about previously, the Concord says things going forward, and it's been 90 days. Will people forget? As you say, people, South Africans do have this habit of, Americans are the same way. We're going to vote for this party. That's the party that just took all your tax money or that just did this. You didn't want to go to Iraq. They voted to go to Iraq. Come on, make your mind up here. But voters are strange when it comes to that. They're kind of fickle. But joining us hopefully here in just a moment. She might have just put it on the screen to enter before the top of the hour, but we got about 3 minutes away, so she may just be getting ready. But that's just an image down there of the lovely lady Refiloe Nt'sekhe, who's the mayoral candidate for Ekurhuleni. There, 3.4 million residents. That's a major metropolitan area in South Africa. Also in Gauteng. And for those who don't know that area, think of Germiston, think of Boksburg, think of, oh, there she is. She's coming on now. I always love to see her smile. And it's also where OR Tambo's at, which is the first destination of most international travelers who come to South Africa. Refiloe, welcome to you. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent, Chris. How are you? Hi, Mark. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. You too.
So you guys know each other, so that's a good thing. Well, let's go and get started. You know, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. But the intent was to bring folks on for 10 or 15 minutes because I know people are busy. But if you can stay longer and share things with us. So this was a chance to do an update. Now, Mark is a guest co-host with me today, taking some of the burden off me.
Wow.
Well, it's a 6-hour stream, you know, and while I've done those streams before, it's also helpful to get other views and input. And so Mark is here as a guest co-host for this portion. So he's going to get a chance to ask you some questions as well. But let me just start off the first thing. So since we spoke a few days back, campaign has continued now. Special voting is underway right now in South Africa. We've already seen a few snafus with that, but that's to be expected. So how is it? Can you give us an update? How's it looking at Ekurhuleni? Because I am excited about your town, and I'm waiting to see somebody give the ANC a PK in Ekurhuleni.
Well, it's been amazing. I got to the voting station at 8. I was number 1 in the queue. It's my tradition to be the first vote for the DA in the ward where I stay in the voting district. And I applied for a special vote, and I'm nowhere to be found.
You couldn't vote? You weren't on the roster?
I'm not on the special vote list. They can't find me, even though I had downloaded the approval letter, which was on my cell phone. And
I said it's to be expected, but I mean, okay. Well, the reason I mentioned this is I already have someone doing field reporting for me in Hermanus, and he went to the Finbos Park retirement home where special voting is taking place, and almost all of the elderly people who live there, who had their letters, who confirmed that they were registered, couldn't vote. The officials there were bewildered. You could see because he
called the whole police force on me because I'm stubborn. I refused to leave. And I had the whole station commander with a couple of troops and the Ekurhuleni Metro Police there to explain to me that they were instructed that if I'm not on the special vote, I wasn't on the special vote for home visit, I wasn't on the special vote for the voting station, yet I had evidence that I'm supposed to vote. And the police said to me, I must leave because what must happen is I'll come back on Monday. I said, I'm not leaving. And I said to them, here's the Electoral Act, a special vote is a special vote. So they escalated my concern to the regional office. It went to the national office, and I'm still waiting to vote, basically.
Oh my goodness.
The station commander then said, he will personally escort me to be the first person to vote on Monday morning.
Well, I mean, I suppose that's great. Vote. I suppose that's great if you have time on Monday. The whole reason we're supposed to vote today because you're busy as a candidate on Monday.
The whole point for me is also then by getting a special vote, then I go around and go and greet voters when they're going to the different voting stations. But the same incident you're quoting from Hermanus, we've had here in Kempton Park, where the IEC was supposed to go to an old age home with 500 people. So they couldn't go, they were not found on the list. Luckily, we had a taxi owner come through and bus all the elderly, 500 of them, to the voting station. So it's been an interesting day just watching all these things unfolding.
Oh my goodness. Well, first off, I'm going to say this.
I still have hope. I will be number 1. I'll be there 6:30. Trust me, I don't sleep. My vote is my democratic right. I will be there 6:30. I will be the number 1 on the queue. I will still phone the station commander. But obviously on the day, then I can vote because I'm registered at that voting station. But yeah, it took about 3 hours of toing and froing between the presiding officer, the regional office, the national office. Yeah. And they say I fell off the bandwagon because I applied twice because remember the election was postponed to a later date. So the special vote was for a different date. So somehow I fell off the list, but I'm still going to vote. What if I lose Ekurhuleni by 1 vote and that vote was mine?
Yeah.
I'm not.
No,
Imagine the Democratic Alliance has just lost Ekurhuleni by 1 vote. And guess who didn't vote? The mayoral candidate.
No, we joke and laugh about that, but elections are decided by 1 vote. I mean, yeah, here in the States, we have congressional elections. 1 million people vote, and the vote is like 3 or 4 people. It's happened here recently, this previous election. It does happen. So listen, I'm going to do this first off. I mean, I do sponsor, I advocate for companies that do business, pro bono here on the channel.
Of course, we must advertise.
Well, I'm going to advertise right now. I'm going to throw a little business to Mark, his direction as an advocate here. He may need to jump in and help out. I mean, when the police try to escort you next time or deny you your right to vote. So with that, Mark, I've thrown a little business potentially your way from the candidate here. And Mark, if you got any questions for Refiloe as we get started here.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to ask you the hard question, which is assume that you don't win outright. Which parties are you willing to do deals with so that you can be mayor?
Ouch, that's a tough question.
Mark, you're being difficult, but while we don't discuss coalition before an election outcome, I will say this is my response to you without giving any particular names. We are prepared to go into a coalition with any party that shares our core values, any party that believes in clean governments that are not corrupt. So I'm sure you can imagine immediately that already excludes 2 particular parties, and I shall not name them. But as long as we've got a shared value and we are prepared to work hard and service the people of Ekurhuleni, that's the DA sort of stance on the national level too. So those are the people we'll consider going to coalition.
So let's just say it without, let's be clear. You can't do a deal with the EFF because
definitely, because they'll nationalize the municipality.
And you can't do a deal with the ANC because as soon as you do that,
because they've stolen 14.3 billion out of this municipality.
Yeah. So as you said, the others might be within that reasonable range.
Not to get them back into the back door.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm glad that both of those deals are ruled out. I asked this question to Herman Mashaba when he was running, and he said, my plan for coalitions is to win outright. And I said, that's not a plan. So I'm glad that you're much more forthright on that front. I would think there are other parties that you can deal with and that you can share.
There are other parties that I think we could have a common value in terms of, especially on a local government. I think it gets more complicated on a national platform, but already when you think on even on a national level, I mean, EFF and ANC are pushing for expropriation without compensation, amendment of the constitution. We don't want to see that happening. So already that rules them out from that space, because we don't want residents of South Africa being tenants of the state. So, I mean, and you can look at everything that they stand for. If you look at EFF, instead of bringing in investors to become employers, they think the state should be an employer. That's just not sustainable. And also the way their policies are configured, they actually want to deter investment into the country, but the policies they're advocating even on a local level. So there's no way we can co-govern with people like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's music to my ears that you say that. I think it's worth ruling people out when they have foolish ideas that are also sinister. Those that will, South Africa has a long history of people being deprived of their land, and to redo that to people again is beyond the pale. But I don't
think you can even trust them on the fiscus, because I don't know if you even saw yesterday. Look, I had a press conference where I was exposing just the corruption I've uncovered in Ekurhuleni, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which came to 14.3 billion over 48 billion rand budget. That's the municipal budget this financial year. That's just of ANC alone, money going to 1.9 chemical toilet, 2 billion, a mega project without a house on site. And I mean, yes, it's a 7-year development from 2017 to 2024. But in my quick calculation, even though it's 2021, we should sort of be halfway. So if it's 22,000, the end result, you should have about 10,000 at the very least of houses, not one house on site. I can't go into government with people like that, unfortunately. I think we need to make a very conscious decision who we choose to govern with. And they failed people of Ekurhuleni. I can't go and say the very people who failed Ekurhuleni, I'm going to prop them back into government and govern with them. That's not how it works. I think our voters will punish us very badly if we go into a coalition with ANC or EFF. Then you can look at a myriad of other parties that I've left out and say, basically, we might not share exact, I mean, some parties, if you look at like Freedom Front, they're clear that they stand for minority. But if you take out that minority in terms of core values and what they fight for, we're not that different, to be honest. Then you can also look at people like IFP, they're not that different as well, you know. So obviously we'll explore. Then there's also the likes of the Action SAs. They are a breakaway from the DA, to be honest. So they are very like-minded, but obviously we will see what the outcome looks like to decide who we need to go into coalition with if we have to go into coalition.
Let's pause there because Action SA are interesting. In other words, you have Mashaba basically outright rejecting the DA, saying all sorts of horrible things about what the nature of the party is.
Oh no, he's done a U-turn. He's actually done a U-turn. I debated one of his mayoral candidates. You know, because time is running so fast, but it's during the course of this week. It was myself, the ANC candidate, and Action SA's candidate. And when they discussed the issue of coalitions, I wasn't even asked the question. It was asked of ANC and it was asked of Action SA. And funny enough, the Action SA candidate says, we would do a deal with Refiloe. And I thought that's interesting because they've never mentioned going into a coalition with us. So that was interesting. It actually came from them, but I'm just giving you the list of potentials that we could look at, because let's say we get 42%, ANC 38, and then let's say Action, I suspect, would get, say, about 8, and then EFF, I think, might shrink, and then the other parties, some of them might actually disappear. Then we might say, to get to the 50+1, then we might have to go into the coalition with an Action, which will then get us over the mark onto the 50+1.
So let me ask you this then.
Maybe Freedom Front. So it might be a DA, Action, and Freedom Front coalition.
So what if you have the kingmaker proposal, right? In other words, Action SA said, great, we'll let the DA govern. You can have a whole bunch of the great positions. You can be deputy mayor, but we want our guy in as mayor. Do you take that deal?
No, I think, we've always gone into coalitions not to sell our souls. What I like about being in the DA is we've said, if we cannot retain our values, would rather stay on the opposition benches. It's a hard pill to swallow because you do want to take over government, but not at the expense of your soul. And that's your values as a political party, because you don't want to lose your voters long term, because you want in 100 years the DA to still exist.
Well, Refiloe, which you've just talked about there, Refiloe, is actually a replay of 2016 and 20. The DA got 42%, the ANC got 38%, and then they had to cobble something together from there. And you didn't have a coalition with the EFF, but they kind of caucused with you, which allowed you to have a minority coalition to control the city. Now it sounds I think it sounds a lot better if what we have going on here is that you have, if you don't get a majority, you don't get the 50+1, which I think it's possible. It's within your grasp.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. But let's say you don't get it, and then you have Freedom Front Plus and you have Action SA. That sounds to me a much more palatable coalition.
Far more reliable.
Yes,
yeah.
than what you had in 20.
More reliable coalition. And let me tell you, let's say we were value aligned with EFF, which we are not. And I categorically want to emphasize which we are not. They are an unreliable party completely, because they go with the wind. They go with what they can get out of a government. So we would just not, they're just such an unreliable, you can't rely on them on anything. One moment they're with you, tomorrow they walk out and you can't even pass budgets. So you actually want coalition governments where your core focus or foundation is to deliver services, pass budgets. First of all, obviously coming in, you want to make sure by the beginning, you already talk about who's getting what positions, if that needs to happen. then you need to make sure that when April comes and budgets are passed, you can rely on each other to pass those budgets to start delivering services. EFF, you can't rely on them. You kind of go into council. They might say, yes, we'll support you, but in the council meeting, they choose not to pitch up. So that's what makes a government unstable. And the last thing you want is to end up with a hung municipality as well. So there's those dynamics that also come into play.
Yep.
So what are the top two things besides the theft that the ANC gets wrong on a policy level? I mean, we know the ANC are corrupt, but on a policy level, what they're doing in municipalities, or let's say in Ekurhuleni in particular, what would you say that you're identifying that's wrong, and that you would, two things that the DA would do differently?
Oh, you mean outside of money management?
I mean, it might be that you allocate resources differently. I mean, I'm wondering, one of the claims that the DA is just, the honest version of the ANC, or like an ANC light, like we're going to do the same stuff, but we're just not going to steal from you. Or are there actual fundamental differences in terms of how you would run a city?
There are some fundamental differences, but remember, this is local government. So it's not like national, where we could have national policy frameworks. Here, you're talking more to service delivery. I mean, certain things are basically getting service delivery done, such as, for example, the DA is the first political party to outright start saying, because of the energy crisis in the country, we wanted to look at independent power producers, alternative energy sources. In fact, Ekurhuleni has started looking at IPPs, but it was because of a motion that was tabled by a DA councillor, or the DA councillors in Ekurhuleni, but they have not even acted it out. So we want to look at, while you fix and maintain infrastructure, which is very badly broken. I mean, we're now sitting on level 4 load shedding in Ekurhuleni, where I'll give you an example. This whole week, we've had load shedding 3 times a day, from 6 o'clock to 8:30 in the morning, from 2 in the afternoon to 4:30, and then from 10 p.m. to midnight. And sometimes after 8:30, we go from load shedding to power outages because the infrastructure has aged so badly. So for residents, it just feels like extended blackouts. So we need to prioritize those infrastructure maintenance, start looking at building new infrastructure, even if it's the current coal-powered energy, and then ultimately start in a parallel process looking at alternative energy sources. One thing that we picked up that ANC is pathetic at doing, that is being passed at national, is that for every house that chooses to go completely solar, they're supposed to get a 75,000 Rand rebate. And ANC has not acted that or promulgated it in council, because it would have been an incentive to say, try and get more people to get onto solar. So, I mean, we've got sun. If you go outside my house right now, the sun is beautiful. Take advantage of it, And we know we need to have a mixed generation of electricity. You can't just rely on solar, because from time to time, you will have rain and it would not be consistent. But if you get solar on every house that can afford to get onto the solar channels, and even when you look at the building of RDP houses, while an RDP house costs 150, when you build it, why not go the extra mile and make sure that part of the infrastructure is to make sure that every house that you give out is already coming with solar energy? Then they don't need to be on the electricity grid, easing the pressure, because we know the population is growing. As Chris said, we're sitting with 3.4 million people. But
there's a huge problem with this. I can see there's a huge problem. How are you going to keep people servants to you when you're running a city if they're independent from the state? Don't you think there's a reason why the ANC like to deprive people of... They don't want them independent. They want them at their knees. They want them at their behest. They want to be able to control them by saying, well, yeah, we can shut the power off, and the only way to kind of keep it going is to keep us voted. I mean, as you say, you want to treat people like autonomous agents.
Long term, for now, we will still have people dependent on Eskom, but we need to start a plan, 25-year master plan. Governments are not built on a 5-year plan, because that's very short term. You need to have a master plan of up to 25-year long-term plan of how do you migrate from Eskom. Eskom is a failing entity. If they failed to build Medupi and Kusile 20 years later, we need to start saying, how do we get people off that dependency? So even though you want people to still create some kind of revenue, there's other revenues that we can look at from residents, such as making sure people pay for their water, their rates. I mean, we've had even now, we've got a bungled up valuation roll where my house is worth 1.5. My neighbor's house has been valued at something like 6 million. And yet the same house, my house is like a mirror of his house.
For
same
taxes.
Size yard, same size house, but because they've got an incompetent company to do the valuation role, we're dealing with bangled up valuation roles. So you need to actually say, with the valuations, the municipal rates and taxes, you can still get revenue from that. And you need to start looking at alternative revenue streams. If you say to companies and residents, generate your own electricity, there are other income streams. Let me give you something that is a lost income stream in the municipality. So I've looked at all the hostels in the municipality, and we've got 25 hostels in the municipality, on average about 100 to 200 people residing in this, and these should be 100 to 200 families. If you renovated these houses versus the ANC, which has returned 250 million rand back to Treasury without using them, converting them into family units, people are prepared to pay rate. There's your social housing, but at the same time, you can start renting these properties out to start giving you revenue income. I said 25 hostels with about 100 to 200. So imagine if you started charging rent. So we're not even exploring options of revenue streams in this metro. Right now, people are not paying because the conditions, oh gosh, I don't even want to tell you. If I could show you on my phone, I would. The toilets, some of them are leaking. It's actually a puddle that you have to jump over to get into the toilet. So you can't even use the electricity faucets because they've rusted. I found black algae on the walls on some of them. And green algae is not bad, but black algae is actually poisonous.
It's your lungs. Not good stuff.
So, but there's income streams that can be explored. Right now, if you compare to Tshwane, they just opened, but they built from scratch 1,200 social housing units in Marabastad. And Marabastad was like near the taxi rank where people didn't really go, but they've lifted up that place. And now they're going to get income from social housing. Some of the units they've built are 3-bedroom flats, 2-bedroom flats, 1-bedroom flats, depending on the needs of a family. And we can do that in Ekurhuleni here. Starting
How much knowledge sharing is there between the DA in different parts of the country? So the DA, I think, started off really as a party of the Western Cape and has grown in other parts of the country. Are you able to learn the lessons of how Cape Town grew as a city and what sort of techniques they use to address poverty and remove red tape from businesses?
I guess I'm going to speak for myself because I look at every part of the government. Maybe I'm also privileged in that I'm a deputy federal chairperson, so I look at the governance reports and saying who's doing what. So for example, when I talk about solar, look at George, where we govern, first solar powered energy airport that even generates extra energy into households, about 200 households next to the airport. There's something you can learn from. Kucha has done the plastic roads. Kucha has done the wind turbines. We've got a couple of open lands in Ekurhuleni. You could see do a feasibility study of how you could actually get wind turbines in Ekurhuleni and look at the types of plastic and whether we have roads that can be built with plastic roads, which is actually more durable than bitumen or tar, depending on what you call it. Yeah, something like Steenbras is a bit more complicated because that was an existing dam that was refurbished by the DA to make sure they reduce the level of load shedding when Eskom puts them on load shedding. But it doesn't have to be the size of Steenbras, but we can look at the Nigel Dam and see if there's a possibility of doing some hydropower of some sort, So we're not So I talked to, for example, even this morning, I was talking to Mpho to say, how did you build these social housing? What is your accreditation level in Tshwane versus what Ekurhuleni has? So I think there's going to be an opportunity for us to learn from each other. And I know when I was speaking to Dr. Ivan Mayer, even though Ekurhuleni is a metro, a local government, he was saying once we get into government, he's happy to loan me experts to come and see what we can do, because it's Western Cape that's driving the alternative energy sources for municipalities to say they can come and explore what Ekurhuleni potentially can and can't do. The other thing that Western Cape does that I want to do in a local government, they've got Westgrow, which is the investment arm of the Western Cape. Why can't you have an investment arm of a municipality, particularly if you want a city, city-led economic growth? So if you've got in Westgrow, but you bring it, let's call it Ekugrow for Ekurhuleni. I'm just being funny, but
No,
maybe
that's
we don't
good.
know what,
That's good. That's
what
good.
the name would be if we got it into Ekurhuleni, or Kula Ekurhuleni or something like that. So Kula means grow, Chris.
Yep.
So then they could look at how do we bring in investments into Ekurhuleni, and it becomes the investment arm that helps us to say, by the way, your people are not investing because you've got energy challenges. Then we fight energy challenges. They look at another stream and say, we've touched base with investors, we've touched base with embassies. So some of the embassies are saying they'd love to come to Ekurhuleni, but they need the roads going to the airport because we've got Tambo to be fixed. Then we fix our roads going to the airport from the industrial zones of the municipality. And we are privileged in Ekurhuleni. We've got the mining belts, we've got some distilleries here. So we can already expand on that and prioritize maybe things like road construction, like these plastic roads. Maybe we can put those on in the industrial areas so that trucks can go on really well-built roads that have been made from plastic, and get Peter, what's his name, Harosho, the mayor from Kucha, to borrow me some of his scientists to see the feasibility of building plastic roads. I'm already been looking at beyond the borders, because I've looked at Denmark and UK doing electricity from waste, because our landfill sites are getting full here in Ekurhuleni, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a case that it's happening elsewhere in the country, to say, why don't we start generating waste from power from waste? And
That's
that
a good
will
point.
substantially reduce the waste in the landfill site. But it's also an opportunity for people to sort the waste into what is convertible into energy.
Well, Refiloe, you're talking about some really interesting, and I'm going to drink your Kool-Aid. As a free market capitalist, I absolutely love what you're talking about here. I just stated clearly. I mean, you're talking about independent power producers, in other words, privatizing power generation. You're also talking about alternative measures that actually have more than one benefit. If you use waste to energy, you reduce waste, you don't pollute the land with landfills, and you get energy out of it. Those are great things. But the ANC
is reducing your carbon footprint.
Well, and there you go. And so that's what I'm about to get to now. So the ANC has completely lost the bubble on this. You said that Eskom is a failing enterprise. I will have to take exception to that and disagree with you. It's a failed enterprise. How can a power company that once delivered 42% of all power generation in sub-Saharan Africa, 42%, 750 million people in sub-Saharan Africa at the time, and Eskom delivered 42% of all power. Now, how can a company like that habitually fail to provide 42% of its installed capacity today out of 52 gigawatts? 42% is typically offline for maintenance or collapsing and failure issue. And meanwhile, they in a fantasy world, Cyril Ramaphosa says, we have a focus on electric vehicles because Toyota is going to build 4,000 electric vehicles in 2025 if we can get the batteries. 4,000 electric vehicles, and they're probably going to be exported anyway. That's ludicrous. And on top of that, Eskom is going to COP26 in Scotland to beg for $30 billion in handouts from the US, from the UK, from France, from Germany. And we're going to be stupid enough to give it to them because Mansouri Cadaver is our chief executive. So we're going to hand out this money, and we know where it's going to go, right into somebody's pockets, ANC. So 30 billion. Now, they just got De Ruyter to lower their debt from 500 million rand to, or 500 billion rand, excuse me, down to just billion, down to 400 billion. And now they want to go borrow an additional that's 600. It's another. So it's 27 billion. They're in debt. They want dollars. They want to borrow another 30 billion on top of that to retire 22 gigawatts of generating power from coal-fired power. How about you get the electricity turned on first, then dream of reducing carbon? And while I'm at it, I'm on soapbox. Give me a minute here, Refiloe. Stick with me. I'm on soapbox here. While we're at it, China is building 350 coal-fired power plants every single year in China. And nobody's saying, hey, China, reduce your carbon footprint. This is the U.S.'s carbon production the last 20 years. From 2000 to 2021, we've gone down almost every single year with a few blips. We've gone from 6 billion tons of carbon dioxide to 4.2 billion tons, and we're being castigated. And South Africa's trying to sign up to that. Well, the Chinese have done this. Like that, not arithmetically, exponential growth in carbon output. And they're not being punished, but the ANC wants to go and comply with this lunacy. So it just drives me absolutely crazy here that the ANC is completely marginal. You're actually bringing ideas here. Okay, that was a soapbox. It's my show. I got to do it. so Refiloe, what's your response to that? Am I drinking too much Kool-Aid or am I on track? I think we're on track.
I think we're on track, Chris. Honestly, I mean, even here, in Ekurhuleni, there's some, I mean, I made my speech on the final rally when we were launching in here in Ekurhuleni before today to say, the mayor wants to build a zoo in Ekurhuleni, but we can't even maintain the little bit of, fauna and flora and natural reserves that we have. In fact, he wants to build a zoo. I feel like Ekurhuleni is already a zoo, we live in a zoo already. We've got a bunny park collapsed. We've got all these.
I've been to that bunny park.
You would cry if you see it today. It's not being looked after, but you want to build a zoo. He wants to build Disney here, but we are a zoo already. Can we fix this? We are the animals in the zoo at the moment as the residents of Ekurhuleni, desperately crying out for service delivery, which will be the freedom that we want, And what is even more sad is, he had projects that were going that make sense to sport and for tourism. There was a golf tournament in the Serengeti Estates. He's actually canceled that. But from what we hear, and I'm going to say it, people say it's because he's not getting a kickback from it. But it was one of the most profitable combination of sports and tourism. Because you used to get some of the best world players to come out and play. And you can imagine when you've got a sports tournament like that, tourism booms a bit, and you've got sports going, and you want to cancel that project. Why not cancel the zoos that you're thinking of building?
Well, let me take a question. That's a very good reflective question. Let me take a question from the chat, and then we'll turn it back over to Mark because I'm sure he's got something great to ask you here. So the question from the chat is actually a fascinating question, and I'm not sure how you approach it. Maybe you've got the answer on it. Now, where did it go? It's just, oh, come on. It just disappeared on me. The question was basically that the transportation, people can't afford. Oh, there it is. It's from Debbie. She says, what's your plan to bring back the trains? People can't afford transport. Is that something, a local competency that you have the ability to influence or affect at the municipal level? Can you address that? And then we'll let you respond to that and then get back to Mark.
Hi, Debbie. I'm glad you're watching. There's two ways of answering Debbie. For one, when we had COVID, in the height of COVID, the train stopped moving in South Africa. So people ended up turning to bus and to taxi. And our taxi industry is not the most properly regulated industry. So we have, Ekurhuleni has wasted something like 4.2 billion building this rapid bus transport system, which has failed. But there's two things needed to have happened. Western Cape and Cape Town are fighting to localize the rail services so we can bring the services to the people so we can take control and sort out the railing. There's all been sagas of train carriages that don't fit our railway networks and money going. They've never built new railway lines in South Africa since 1994. So that's a problem. But where I'm coming from, the one thing I have discovered with transport, and it might be a pity that when we speak, we've got such limited time. I think transport is actually a remedy to addressing the apartheid spatial development. Because when people have access to good public transport, they have access to economic opportunity. whether it's somebody running what we call a spaza, which is a little township shop, and then they go into the CBD to buy their wares, or somebody going to work using a good transport system. So the fact that they've wasted 4.2 billion building a bus rapid transport network that doesn't function, doesn't make sense. So one of the things that I was planning to do is, one, use more modern ways of looking at transport. For start, why not make your bus routes run along the same routes as where the train would have gone within Ekurhuleni? Because we know there's more commuters on train than there is on bus and taxi. So let the people move, say, from Tembisa to Kempton Park on a bus, but let the government let it be subsidized so that it's affordable for the residents of the metro. Because anyway, we're pouring in lots of money, so let it benefit those who do not have. Do what Cape Town does. The elderly and unemployed must get to travel for free in between peak periods. And also, the guys right now are selling tickets out of containers, and yet there's supposed to be a state-of-the-art bus stop. Finish those projects. It's such a basic thing. And then make the nodes become nodes where you've got transport needs, so that we're starting slowly to bypass the railway lines, because that's a national competency. And what pains me, if I can give you an example, my children used to go to kindergarten. So the ladies who used to work as assistants to the teachers came out of the townships. They used to tell me, because the railway lines are so unreliable, they leave home at 4 when their children are still sleeping, and they get home at 8 p.m. So you leave home at 4 to get to work at 8 a.m. You leave work at 4 to get home at 8 p.m. You leave your children sleeping and you come home to your children sleeping. You only see your children over the weekend. But if you had a good bus transport, public transport system like this bus system, get more buses on those routes where the train stations are, convert some of those train stations and have next to the train station a proper bus station, so people can catch a bus, subsidize them, and let them get into the CBDs where they're working as domestic workers and gardeners, or people going to work in the CBDs. That's what a good government does, because you need to get the economy going. It's a subsidy, but until people can get to a point where they can start paying for public transport, that initial investment, you will get the tenfold in the future when people are empowered and get access to economic opportunities, whether from an SMME point of view or from access to the job markets. So that's what I would have loved to do. I would love to do when I take over, to make sure that we bring people closer to economic opportunities, or we bridge the gap by having a functional, public transport system. But also, one of the things that we must also look at, not only that, I like to quote DA governments. George was noted as having the best public transport system in South Africa, not even Cape Town. But what George says, they looked at the taxi industries and they had a meeting with the taxi associations and said to them, why don't we swallow you and you become stakeholders into the George? It's called Go George, the public transport system of George. Ours here in Ekurhuleni is called Harambe, which means let's go. And what they did is get all the taxi drivers trained, let them have a uniform, let them understand, get their taxis roadworthy, because a lot of taxis are not roadworthy, and incorporate them into the Harambe system. And every taxi driver and taxi association basically become shareholders of the public transport system. And then they are trained properly, because if you look at Go George, Mercedes-Benz was the company that they were using. They've got different size buses to suit different size traffic requirements. And they've trained them how to drive properly, license them properly, public driving licenses, they call them PDPs here in South Africa, so that everybody's on board. Now they've professionalized the public transport system. It is such a pleasure, because the guys wear uniform. They wear beautiful lime green color with gray pants, and they've actually incorporated even making it accessible for persons with disability. So this is how you run a proper bus system. While George is a small municipality, there's nothing wrong with learning from a small municipality and amplifying it to a metro municipality to get a proper public transport system so that we bridge this apartheid spatial development and get people access to economic opportunities. And that's how I do handle the public transport system.
Well, that's quite a detailed answer there. Ooh, what's that? We got feedback there. That's quite a detailed answer, Refiloe. Thank you so much. Folks, you're listening to Chris White Africa here on special election coverage for South Africa's 2021 municipal elections. Special voting taking place today, the 30th of October, and tomorrow, Sunday, the 31st of October. Unless, of course, your name is Refiloe Nt'sekhe, then you can't vote in Ekurhuleni. Or if you're showing up at Hermanus, apparently you can't vote because you're not on the roll. But my special feature guest is Refiloe, who is a mayoral candidate for Ekurhuleni, which is a metropolitan area in South Africa, in Gauteng province, with 3.4 million residents, and it's got its own challenges. In addition to that, sitting here in the studio on that side of the Atlantic is Mark Oppenheimer, an advocate who works constitutional law in South Africa, has made several appearances before the Constitutional Court, and he's my special featured guest host with me today. And things just worked out rather serendipitously for us because Mark and Refiloe, this is a great combination here. But I'm going to get back to this. But before we let you go, Refiloe, because we're not done yet, you can't go. I've got a super chat question I got to get to later on, but it is Mark's turn to ask you a question. Mark's been very patient. It's his turn to ask you a question. So, Mark, the floor is yours.
So the Free Market Foundation have had this program called Kaya Lam, where they ensure that people are able to get title deeds when they've lived on land but have no private property owner rights over it. Is this something that you would want to roll out in Ekurhuleni if you were mayor?
Of course. Is that a simplified answer?
Well, yeah, that was a lot shorter than the last one, but okay. So,
look,
right,
I can expand on it. Obviously, when you look at housing, you need to look at housing in terms of the different opportunities you can provide. I think even the Minister of Housing has acknowledged that you can't give everybody an RDP house. So whilst you still have a budget for RDP houses, let RDP houses go to those who are most needy and need to be helped to build. Secondly, why not give people service stands? And all of it is giving people the title deeds. Give people an RDP house where those are the most neediest people in our communities, and the elderly and the disabled who will never be able to go out and work and build their own thing. 2, use the FLISP model and give people opportunity to get a voucher to go so that you go to housing with your salary between 3.5 to 22,000 and apply for housing to get the subsidy. Then let's say you're buying a house for 300,000. The more you earn, the less the subsidy, the less you earn, the higher the subsidy. Mm-hmm. Then those people will be able to buy some kind of a bond house that's subsidized by government. 3, ensure that those who are able to get service stands, they get service stands, but already on the stand, they've got a title deed, so they've got the title to that particular land, and then it becomes an asset. While the person is going out to work and getting their 5,000 rand a month, they can start buying some bricks, some cement or whatever, or a log cabin, as some people have started building, or even a container. But a service standard shows they've got water and electricity and storage line on the site, and then they build when they're ready and have managed to raise the funds to do that themselves. Now, there will be those who cannot ever afford to build anything, and that's where you need to accommodate them in social housing, which is basically rental property owned by the state, the one that I was alluding to, like what Tshwane has done. Let me give you an example. I speak to a lot of taxi drivers, and well, I speak to just about everybody, but some of the taxi drivers, as an example of a category, will say to me, Refiloe, I don't want a house in Gauteng. My wife and kids live in Limpopo. I just want a place where I can sleep. So that guy's probably looking for a bachelor flat because he's probably going to finish ranking at 10 p.m., start work tomorrow morning at 5, 6 o'clock. He literally is just somewhere to lay his head and feel safe. So if you build social housing that are bachelor flats, this guy comes in, rents for 1,000 rand a month. At the end of the year, he goes home, he's built his 3-bedroom house in Limpopo in a village somewhere. So we need to start looking at what are the different needs of the different community members that we have in our society. Not blanketly just say we're going to give people RDP houses. And that's what's important. But also, there's a lot of Ekurhuleni people who were given RDP houses with a happy letter and have not been issued with title deeds. It's so easy to actually just go and have almost like a census of those people because they're already in the register, update them. And some of them have then passed on, but their children are still residing in those houses. Then give them security in those properties by giving them a title deed into that property. So it's ownership. And then tomorrow, you'll find that if you go for a bank loan, at least you've got an asset that you can use as against a bank loan to start a business as a hairdresser or car wash or whatever you want to start, because you've got some kind of a surety when you go to the bank to say, I have something that I own.
Let's see,
and I think that's also a way of kickstarting the economy.
Well, the problem with that, Refiloe, is, of course, is this addresses the point Mark was making. It's a question, do you want people to be dependent on the state? That's what you want. And he's also referring to a topic that I've talked about frequently since I've gone public, since my retirement from the intelligence services, that I've talked about endlessly, and that is the concept of dead capital. We're talking about billions of dollars of capital that's sitting under the feet, literally, of South Africans, because what you just alluded to, they have no collateral. They have nothing. So if they actually took, now there are issues with it. Some people will sell the land, but whatever. But the point is, there's a way to do this effectively, transfer that and give the over 20 million South Africans who are probably living in RDP housing, because it's not 20 million houses, but lots of people live in them, give them title deed, and they can go to a bank to make a tuck shop or start a spaza and buy supplies by saying, here, I have collateral. And then they've got a stake in making sure their business is successful, and then get a small business loan or something like that. So that's kind of, I think that's where Mark was going. I see him nodding that's dead capital. Now, here's something that's ironic.
Even more powerful is when you know your house is at stake.
Yes.
You are more determined to make sure that business succeeds because you have to pay back that loan with the bank.
That's right. And also
just getting something for free. You don't want to lose your home.
No. And also when it's your home, people tend to take better care of their home. They repair it when it belongs to them. They keep it up. They put flower gardens out because it's theirs. And it lifts the spirit and it gives human dignity. There's a whole lot of positive in this, and it all is being held back by the ANC by and large. Now, here's an irony for you, Refiloe. You're going to like this. In 1995, I was teaching at Iowa State University. I was still on active duty in the Army as a captain, and I did a master's program. My focus was on international political economy, community and regional planning, so exactly the things you're talking about here, and also cultural anthropology. So that served me very well. You'll never guess what my master's thesis was on. I looked at what the ANC promised to build 1 million homes in 5 years and the housing subsidy program they came up with. And I did a thesis talking about housing need versus access to that, because the way they did it was just a dollar or a rand amount. If you have this much money, you'll get it. And I said, that's not what's needed. If the guy lives in Joburg and he works in a mine, he stays in a flop house or a hostel, his need for housing is not as big as his family back in KZN, where his wife and 3 kids are. They need X square meters of space for living. They need an evolution unit. So I came up with a very complicated, actually, I'm not very good at math, so it was pretty tough, but I came up with a complicated formula to say, based on housing need, this is who should get the subsidy and not based on income. And unfortunately, it wasn't done that way. But I thought you might find interesting that in 1995, I was doing master's thesis research on exactly the topics we're talking about right now, which are still a mess. And with that, I'm going to stop there, tooting my own horn, and give Mark another chance to get a question in here.
Well, I want to say this has been a really wonderful conversation. I think it's good to be able to confront your politicians, and it's not been very straightforward with COVID. I mean, you've been denied the opportunity to go out into the streets and kiss babies and hand out pamphlets. But I wish you all the best in the campaign, and I look forward to seeing you running Ekurhuleni and not running it into the ground like the ANC have.
I'm running it out of the ground. That's the plan.
Taking it to space.
I think it is in the ground. It's going to have to be lifted out of the ground now.
Well, if it's going to go to space, I can hook you up with the South African who's now an American and can get you there on SpaceX. That's Elon Musk. But Refiloe, listen, we want to thank you for your time. Are you going to stay a little bit longer? Do you have to head off? I think Mark might have to head off here shortly. I'm not sure. I think that's what he said. So Mark, do you have to drop off now?
Yes, but Chris, thanks for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure. And it's been wonderful to have a chat with you. Good to see you again.
You too. It's good to see you again. I was told I'm here till 6, so I'm on your, it's up to you. It's got 15 minutes. I'm happy to carry on chatting unless you have a different plan.
No. We'll keep you. I don't pay Mark enough. I mean, since I pay him nothing, I can't keep him longer. But Mark, thanks a lot as always. It's a distinct pleasure. Really appreciate coming on this weekend and proving to me that in fact some South Africans actually work on the weekend. Thanks a lot, brother.
Cheers.
Nice seeing you again, Mark.
Ciao.
All right, folks, that's Mark Oppenheimer, constitutional advocate and attorney who focuses on issues for his clients that the law comes into conflict, or actually the application law comes in conflict. And here we are back now. It's just Refiloe and myself now. This has been a fascinating conversation, and your answer has been really, really interesting. I had a couple of super chats. Now, this one here, let me get to this one because it came up a bit ago. I don't want to neglect this forever because viewers probably still here. This is from Mala. Mala gave a super chat and said, is Section 9 equality still standing for South African women? And will there be any talk about that in this election? I don't know if that's the case. I'm not familiar with Section 9. Do you know what that's referring to?
I'm not 100% familiar, but at the moment, those would be more when we look at national government elections. So that would be more for 2024 elections. This is a local government municipal election. So we more focus on, if I can just run through the departments quickly.
Sure.
You're looking at clinics, you're looking at roads, stormwater, energy from the point of view of the municipality, your substations versus your big power stations, your waste management, your landfill sites, your cemeteries, your parks, your sports, recreation, arts and culture at a local government level, your libraries. That's what local government sort of covers in a very, I might have lost one or two, but briefly, that's where like your cemeteries are covered. So the Section C, I know it's a national competence. It definitely is not something that we look at into this local government election.
No, exactly. That's fair enough. That's what kind of expected. That was actually a super chat from a U.S. viewer, so they're not familiar with the South African system. So fair enough. The Brett Sessoms, who's also in the U.S., I got lots of U.S. folks watching the stream today, said DA areas have better service deliveries than ANC run areas. That's a no-brainer. Well, I think that's probably a true statement. And ANC ran areas have the worst water and the dirtiest water. Yeah, that's probably a true statement too. And as you mentioned, sewage issues here in a lot of places. It's pretty frightening, some of the stuff that's going on out there. Brett just gave another super chat, and it's not Salty Cracks. I think his payday has come this weekend. He's been very generous with super chats today. So Brett said, will your guest work with AfriForum or the Freedom Front Plus? Well, AfriForum is a civil rights organization.
It's a civil organization.
So
we already have a relationship with them. In fact, some of our members, DA members, are members of AfriForum because there's nothing prohibiting members who are of AfriForum is just a civil organization that believes in protecting the Afrikaans language. That's the point. So a lot of our Afrikaans members in the Democratic Alliance already belong to AfriForum. Freedom Front, as I mentioned earlier, is one of those organizations which, yes, it protects minority rights, but other than that, in terms of their core values, they're not that different from us. In fact, they're quite liberal as well. Other than the fact, like the DA is a non-racial organization, it's a multi-religious, we have people who've got different sexual orientation, different religious groupings, but in the main, we're not anti-Freedom Front. They're probably more solid as a political party.
Well, Brett just said he knew that they're their civil rights organization. No, Brett, my response wasn't directly to you. It was more to the audience. A lot of people aren't familiar with AfriForum, so we want to make it clear. And then, of course, Refiloe also explained that much better. So thank you for that. There was, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read what someone wrote here. It threw me off a little bit there. But okay, so here we are, and this is what I'll get to now. The election in Ekurhuleni. Are you getting a sense? Are you feeling it? Are you feeling your oats? Is this the time? Is it going to happen? Do you think? And now look, if after the fact somehow it doesn't happen and you don't get 50+1, I'm not coming back. Refiloe, you promised me. No, I'm not going to do that to you. But I mean, but you're on the ground. You've talked to people, and even today you tried to went to a polling station. What's the sense on the ground? I mean, I saw the numbers you talked about earlier. If you had to go in a coalition, what that might play out, but do you think you can get to 50 plus? Because the ANC just has to lose about 14 seats, and you gain about, I think you have to gain about 18 to be the plurality. 18 will give you, I think, majority, if I'm not mistaken, but something, maybe it's more than that. But the point is that you can get a plurality pretty easy, but you think you can get a majority based on the feedback and the enthusiasm you're seeing in Ekurhuleni?
Yes, let me start by saying I am going to vote on Monday, Chris. They've just ruled me out for a special vote, but I'll have to rejig my diary a little bit on Monday. So
no, I got that. I was just, we're having a little fun with it because, but I mean, look, I was going to have more fun when say, oh, you didn't get to vote. Look at the racism in South Africa. A black woman can't vote. What's that all about?
Yeah, no, I'm a fighter. Nobody's going to stop me from going to exercise that right. But on a more serious note, Chris, I think I really believe we have an opportunity to win outright. And one of the things I've said to people is, unlike the way America is constituted, we have a lot of small little parties. But the reality, I want your viewers to also understand, in 2016, we were able to bring ANC to under 50%. The problem with small parties is that while we were able to bring ANC to under 50%, these very small parties went into coalition with ANC. The AIC, as an example, were promised that Matatiele would go back to KZN and out of Eastern Cape because AIC is predominantly from that area in the Eastern Cape. And it didn't materialize in 2019, even though they demarcated the provinces. And then there is the IRASA, which also went into coalition with ANC. So by propping up small parties, they went into coalition with ANC, and ultimately ANC got into government through the back door instead of an outright majority. And we are starting to say, Ekurhuleni people, or South Africans broadly, who are looking at the municipalities, if you want more of the ANC, it's important to be careful of the small parties who might go into coalition with ANC and let them in through the back door again to govern. And most South Africans are clear that from 2016, even today, they do not want the ANC again, which is why they might have gone to the small party, but not realizing that you might support a small party, but once they've been elected, the small party now is in control of your vote, and they use your power to go and prop the ANC back into power again. So we've been saying to them, don't support small parties. It's very dangerous because they were promised high salaries because obviously they become MMCs, which is members of the Mayoral committee. They become chairpersons. So because of the large salaries that come with being in government, they are happy to then go and get ANC into government through them and being empowered to get these big salaries. And people must be very careful. I don't think this country can afford any more ANC. But the sooner we can get ANC out of the local governments, it paves the way for us to get ANC out of government in 2024 in the provincial and national elections. Because by that time, people would have had a taste of what a DA government that delivers water, sanitation, doesn't steal 14.3 billion rand. Even if you convert it to dollars, I tell you, Chris, it's still a lot of money.
It's nearly $1 billion.
$1 billion.
Yep.
If you just roughly, I'm not sure what the exchange rate is, but that's roughly about $1 billion stolen out of the coffers this year alone.
One city.
So you're talking 14 billion rand out of a budget of 48 billion. You work out the maths. That's almost a quarter of the total city budget being stolen by those who are elected to govern.
And that's
imagine the service delivery if we had delivered services for that 14 billion rand.
And that's just the money we know about. There's probably more that we.
That's just the money I uncovered on the campaign trail in 6 weeks.
Just imagine. We've seen all this stuff from Zweli Mkhize's digital vibes to all these other scandals. It's off the charts. It's crazy.
There's others that at the moment is just rumors, but I just haven't had enough time to go on the campaign trail because I do the Jerry Maguire called Follow the Money. And I've uncovered these The 2 billion rand mega city, 22,000 houses, not one house built, 1.9 billion rand worth of toilets. You could have built people houses instead of toilets. And these toilets are literally non-existent. We still have over 20 families in informal settlements sharing one toilet. There's indignity, not dignity for our people.
Indeed, indeed. And I think the phrase you want to say is, show me the money.
That's it.
From Jerry
So
Maguire.
show you the money, follow the money, and see what's being done with the money.
Absolutely. Somebody was asking earlier about the DA logo. I mean, I can't explain that. I'm not familiar. Are you able to? No, I mean, can you explain? I mean, there's a sunrise. I guess that's for hope, and the colors, I'm sure they mean something. Is there some logic to that?
The DA logo is actually derived from the flag colors of South Africa. So we took the colors of the country. And if you look at the colors of the country, obviously the only color you don't see there is black because it was difficult. We had to have blue because we own blue. It's our CI.
Mm-hmm.
But black stood for the Black people of South Africa. Blue was the blood that was shed during apartheid era and fighting for our freedoms. The yellow is about the sunlight of this country, and the green is for the prosperity that this country has. And obviously we just converted it to a round circle because of the potential of this country. But it comes from the colors of the flag, and that's the meaning of the colors of the flag.
Well, there you go. That's brilliant. Listen, it's a big day, Monday, and we'll see what happens. The DA, people are talking about, how the DA doing the national number. Mark and I discussed this before you came on, and that number doesn't matter. I mean, people think it does matter. I mean, last time the DA nationally in the municipal elections, the total vote count got nearly 27% of the vote, which is the best showing it's had in any national or the local election. But that figure doesn't matter. What matters is how many votes you get in Ekurhuleni, how many votes you get in Buffalo City, how many votes you get in eThekwini, how many votes they get in Bloemfontein. And that's what matters. I mean, if you win municipalities, then as you just said, listen, Refiloe, if I didn't know better, I think you went back and watched all my old streams and stole all my material, because you said exactly what I've been telling people for the past year. This election is so consequential because this is an opportunity to show the voters of South Africa who just habitually vote for the ANC just out of habit or just out of, thankfulness for what the perceived role they had in liberation struggle. They'll vote for them no matter what, to show them what an honest, transparent, responsive, legitimate government at the municipal level can do, fixing roads, removing rubbish, answering constituents' questions. Now, that was sort of disrupted across the country last time because of the fractious coalition that took place in Nelson Mandela Bay, where under Athol Trout, we saw that, and then it disappeared because the ANC, undermined that coalition. And in Tshwane, we never really got to see that because it was not a real proper coalition. And in Joburg, I don't think that Herman Mashal was really ready to run the city. So we haven't really had a chance yet. Now, there's a chance between today and 2024. Today and 2024, all these parties, any opposition party that wins 50 plus one isn't beholden to a coalition, can say, we're ruling, come to us. If it doesn't work, we're responsible. One of our members is guilty of corruption. Let's expose that and let's shame and kick that person out of the party. Not like the ANC and just bury it. Ace Magashule yet to stand trial for the asbestos, 255 million. And then Zundile Zandile Gumeda. Who's dozens of charges. Not only has she not stood trial, but she's also been appointed to the provincial legislature so that she could draw a salary. And as soon as there was an uproar about it, she was suspended, but she's still drawing a salary. That's the ANC. They don't get rid of corruption. They move it around the party.
The Speaker of Parliament, they're implicated with human trafficking and then appointed into becoming the Speaker of the National Assembly. The more corrupt you are, the more you get promoted.
We could spend all day uncovering just the top officials in the ANC, but I don't want to do that because you're going to have to head out. But what I want to say to you is I want to thank you again for coming on. It's a real pleasure. I hope to continue this professional relationship in the future, whether you become the mayor or not, and talk about what's going on in South Africa, because I think you're a very dynamic lady. It's a pleasure to have you on. It's also a real pleasure to show an articulate, talented, dedicated, patriotic Black woman in South Africa who is not part of the ANC, who is out there to make a difference. And with that, Refiloe, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Oh, you're going to respond to that. Go ahead. Let's respond to that. Go ahead.
No, I just laugh because whenever people say that the ANC feel it's a shit, they want me. They always think, why am I in the DA? They want me to be in the ANC. I mean, they've offered me to be a deputy minister. I said, I'm not. I'm not going to join an organization that's corrupt to the bone. And for them, I guess they feel like every Black person who's articulate should be with them. And I'm not going to join a party that steals from the poor. And what pains the most is when people say, we know apartheid was probably the most painful thing to have in the history of the world. But even more painful is Black oppression of Black people by a Black political party, which is the biggest liberation movement in the world, because ANC is actually the biggest liberation movement in the world. And today people are saying that same liberation movement is oppressing us by failure to deliver services. I can't be a part of that, Chris.
No, I agree with you 100%.
can't.
Well, the other thing too is the ANC is always crowed about, well, we are very egalitarian. 42% of our members of parliament are women. Yeah, but how many of those women are competent and qualified to do that? That's the bigger question. Not many of them, in my view. Some, but not many. So that's why they want you. You're competent, and that's why they'd love to get you, because you'd add to the very thin stable of members of parliament in the ANC that are actually competent at their job.
But how do you have an intellectual debate with fellow people who are not competent? I mean, I know in the DA we also have diversity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We've got people who mobilize and are not literate. But it's far more engaging when I know that if I need to have an intellectual debate, I have counterparts who are also academics. In the ANC, I'm not sure how that conversation would go about.
I'm not sure there would be a conversation like that for starters. But with that, I'm going to give you an opportunity to get something else in here at the end to share with us. If you want to maybe exhort people to come out or encourage them to come out and vote in Ekurhuleni on Monday. And if they got special voting today and tomorrow, anything you want to say about the election campaign? And maybe next week, I'll be able to call you mayor.
That would be fantastic, Chris. But I think very briefly, because we're almost time to go. Chris, for us, this is the now or never election. If we don't make the right choices using our heads, this is the opportunity for us to fix the country, and starting with fixing our municipalities by I actually call it hiring a political party that's competent to do it. We've proven no matter, you can take our worst run municipality and compare it to the best run ANC government, we still govern better than the ANC. Because we put competent people in place, we don't steal people's money. And it's an opportunity for South Africans to say, you have an opportunity to hire a political party that brings in competence, that has a track record of good governance into government for 5 years. It's just a 5-year contract. Take a chance. And if you're not happy with us after 5 years, which I doubt you will be, you're welcome to fire us. And that's the plea to South Africans. I plead as a South African, I plead as a single mother of 3 boys who have no other citizenship other than South Africa, that we have a country that is on its knees begging for help, bled. The country coffers is like a sieve. The money is leaving like water being put through that sieve. We need to turn off the taps and allow money to go towards service delivery. Ultimately, it is the money of South Africans, and South Africans deserve dignity. And I plead with them to say, let us get into government, wherever you are, whether it's for Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg, Tshwane, anywhere, give a chance to the Democratic Alliance so you can see your life changing for the better. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me on.
Refiloe, it's a distinct pleasure. Oops, I got a reflection. It's been a distinct pleasure once again to have you. Thank you so much for heeding the call and coming on the program twice now. It's awesome. My audience has truly enjoyed the words. Many people are inspired by what you got to say. So let's hope that turns and translates into votes at the polls this weekend for special voting and on Monday. So with that, thank you so much. Best of luck to yourself in this election and your party, and we'll see how it goes on Monday. We'll be watching eagerly.
It'd be nice to engage maybe on Tuesday just to get a feeling of what the results are looking like.
Well, I will be doing some stuff on Tuesday, but my streams are going to be a little weird because I'm standing for election on Tuesday, and I have to go to the polls. Yes. Well, I'm
good luck to you.
Well, thank you, and I really need it because I'm not on the ballot. The judge of elections position, which is critically important, no one from either party is on the ballot. And I find that unconscionable. So I'm going to step into the fray. I'll be at the polling station for a few hours during the lunch hour. I'm teaching Tuesday morning and again in the afternoon. I'll be there at the lunch hour. I'll stand there, try to bring people to my standard and vote me as an independent writing candidate, even though I'm registered in one of the parties. And then I'll be there again in the evening for that push and see if I can get elected as a writing candidate. I'll let you know. So maybe we'll get you Tuesday. I'll go through my interlocutors since I don't have your personal contact. We'll do it that way.
Oh my goodness, that's a crime. We'll make sure you get those details so you can contact me directly, Chris. Best of luck to you and thank you so much.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Refiloe Nt'sekhe, the mayoral candidate for Ekurhuleni Metropolitan in the Gauteng province of South Africa, a city of 3.4 million people. And you may not have heard of Ekurhuleni if you're not from South Africa, but if you've been to South Africa, you've been there. You've probably landed OR Tambo, the airport there in that city.